I appreciate everybody for joining us today in this webinar and have some exciting stuff for you. So this webinar I put together called Common Reasons Why GA4 Does Not Match Your E-commerce platforms. And it's really based on a critical question that a lot of our customers ask. And our goal is to really pass on as many experiences and lessons to you all on how to handle this, how to think about it, and how to hopefully overcome it. And so let's go ahead and jump right into it. So after this webinar, my goal for you all attending today is to be empowered with the following understandings. What I want to do in today's webinar is empower everybody with the following. First of all, we want to understand why GA4 doesn't match ecom data. Ecom here is going to be another word for Shopify, BigCommerce, Magento, WooCommerce, whatever e-commerce platform you're using to actually get your orders in. Going forward, we're going to reference that as ecom, as your ecom data, just so we can differentiate between the two. The second thing we're going to cover is how to avoid common mistakes so that it is as accurate as possible, right? We can't always bank on perfection, but we can certainly mitigate any reasons that it may not match. The third is how to use the data once it is more accurate, right? There's different things that you can do with the data, how to think about it, and how to use it as part of a bigger picture here. Having GA4 and e-commerce platforms be such a critical piece of your success. And I hope you guys can stick around to the end. We do have a very compelling giveaway for you that we think is really gonna, it seems that a lot of people are very happy with this giveaway. So we're going to be passing it on only for people that are attending today's webinar. Before jumping in, I want to give you guys context as to why I'm speaking to this and a little bit about me so you guys can understand where I'm coming from. So first of all, I'm the CEO of PenPath, and PenPath is an e-commerce intelligence platform, which essentially aggregates all the data from all of these different platforms that you use and enables teams to take action on that data and provides the dashboards and reporting automations. We're based out of St. Louis, and I've helped brands interpret and scale their revenue to the quantity of about $525 million in incrementality and revenue that they wouldn't have driven otherwise. And I'm obsessed with the formula of inputs and outputs. I really apply this first principle thinking to all things data, and I hope that can maybe give you guys ideas as well on how to apply that. So that's just basically saying, when I do X, Y happens. How do I 10X X if it worked to 10X Y, right? And if not, what else do I need to do? And really simplifying the game of data to inputs and outputs, I think gives everybody a lot of clarity. Now, getting the data to work and be usable in that manner is the tricky part, which is what we help with in PenPath. And so throughout my career, I've had a couple of different brands. I had a large lifestyle brand when I was younger, and I really have been in the industry for a while. And what I always wanted to do, just personally, is I wanted to not waste hours punching in information into spreadsheets, right? And I wanted to get that information that was relevant, that could drive growth as quickly as possible so that I could go from thought to action, right? And really minimize that time because I knew that a lot of money was at stake. And so, rather than spending my time in spreadsheets, I wanted to be interpreting those insights and taking action. And so a lot of the things that we're going to sort of explain in today's call is going to have a lot of that influence as well. So we're not just going to show you how to get GA to match your ecom platform, but we're going to show you how to apply that data as well. And I'm going to give you examples of the data and how we've seen it. And so I do want to just give a little bit of context as to how I've worked with a lot of the data, because it's going to give you that background knowledge on some of the things I'm going to reference and maybe even some of the examples. So that's why I want to just explain to you quickly how we've built a system that has given us the familiarity we need to speak to these points, right? And so our platform works in a manner where on the far left, we pull all the raw data from these platforms, right? And these are just a few of the many platforms we connect to. So we've had to understand how these platforms deliver that data, and we've had to understand how to make all that data work in aggregate and store it, and then how to eventually model it so that it can be visualized in dashboards and automated reports so that the end user can have those insights. And so whenever you think about, me speaking, I have a unique perspective where, we're not just pulling out the data and putting it somewhere and just hoping for the best. We're actually thinking about how does this actually get used at the end of the day. And I hope to bring those experiences again to you today. And that's where a lot of these mistakes and lessons that I'm going to be sharing will come from. So we specifically focus working with e-commerce brands, and our platform powers a lot of their automated insights. And so we are very passionate about the space and hope to, again, give you guys some of these experiences. So let's get started. Essentially, we all have different platforms that do different jobs very well. And there is a little bit of overlap, right? And so the premise of today's call, again, is GA4 not matching e-commerce. But I think it's important to ask ourselves, why do we want to use two different platforms? Why do we not just use Shopify for or whatever? I'm going to use Shopify frequently here, but I want you guys to think about this or substitute that for Magento, WooCommerce, or whatever other platform, right? Just because Shopify is so popular, that's the one I'm going to use it throughout some of these examples. So the point is that why do we not use Shopify for its traffic data, right? Because there is some traffic data in there. And why do we not use GA4 for its revenue data? Because there is some revenue data in there. And that's because both of these platforms have some of that overlap, but you may want to use one more than the other because of its reliance and accuracy. And there's different reasons why both will have specialized or metrics that are not available in the other. We're going to be talking more about that here shortly. But essentially what we want to do here in a perfect world is, just to walk through this use case is we're all advertising, right? If you're an e-commerce brand or you're managing money for brands, you're spending that money, right, across different places. So Facebook, Google Ads and TikTok in this example, maybe you spend 25 grand in each of those, right? And in a perfect world, on the other side of that, you're going to be getting, you're generating money from those platforms, and it's telling you, Facebook brought in 75K, Google 80, TikTok 95, and that's data that's going to be best served through GA4. And then maybe in Shopify, you're understanding product sales. So we made $150,000 in sales for one product, $100,000 for another product. And that's where the relationship between both platforms is critical and why we want them to match, right? And so whenever we go to one and it's not really matching with the other, that's why things can start breaking down, because you want to get to that level of detail where we understand, okay, how much money did we generate from Facebook, or how many products did we sell? So in a perfect world, this is all synced up, but of course, we are not living in a perfect world. We do see this commonly happen in our platform where we're seeing, hey, gross revenue from ecom is saying 1.57. Maybe in GA4, we're seeing, 189, 89 million or 89,000. So again, let's dissect how you can avoid this in more detail. I do want to encourage everybody to ask questions. I do have the chat open here if you guys want to unbox anything further. But when you bridge the gap, you want to set yourself up for success. You want to minimize errors. You want to be empowered with best practices. And we want to understand how things work. That's, again, part of bridging that gap. And hopefully you don't have this kind of reaction at the end of the day when you're trying to solve these problems. So before we can solve a problem, let's understand how some of these platforms are tracking data. And I don't know the experience level of everybody on this call. Maybe some of you are very technical, others may not be as technical, but I do want to make sure we cover some of the basics. So how do these platforms capture data? I think this is fundamental to making the assumption of how we can get them to match. So GA4 is installed on your website through JavaScript, right? So it's a JavaScript code that you put in your Google Tag Manager, and then every time somebody goes to your website, the browser loads that Tag Manager data and it captures information. What's nice about GA4 is that it captures a lot of information around the behavior of users and events happening on your website. Now, it is happening at the browser level. Another word for that is client side, right? On the browser level. Whereas your ecom platform is happening more on the CMS sort of almost server side level, if you will, where if you're going to get a sale, it needs to record that sale, right? And so when it comes to data, your The pros of GA4 is visibility around that user journey. And we're going to explain a little bit more about why GA4 is more accurate when it comes to the user journey in a moment. But that is what the reliance in GA4 is for. And unfortunately, it does rely on the ecom platform to provide some of that data, and can be blocked at times as well from cookie blockers and certain browser limitations. So on the ecom side, let me make sure I go to the bottom of this. On the ecom side, this is very detailed information about products and orders, but it lacks that customer journey data. And again, Shopify and these others sometimes have that traffic data, but it's not as powerful. And so the first common mistake that we see is not using native integrations. And so let me explain what I mean by that. So Shopify recently, after everybody was begging, finally released a plugin that said, okay, if you use the Shopify plugin, we're going to send the enhanced e-commerce data to GA4. So if somebody does a purchase, if somebody adds to cart, how much they spent, Shopify sends that data to GA4, and they use their native plugin for that purpose. And so we've actually helped quite a lot of customers understand this because they were trying to install it through all enhanced e-commerce tracking, which is how GA4 installs some of this data. They were installing some of this, and it was not sending it correctly. If you're doing it through Tag Manager, and so the native integration was finally released, and now it works much better. There are other plugins for Magento and BigCommerce. So definitely let us know if you have any questions around that. But this is a really big common mistake. Again, if you don't do this, you're maybe going to have basic tracking in GA4, but you're not going to get that enhanced ecom tracking. So some of the ecom tracking that happens with these native with the native integration might be pulling in some events. So you're going to get the page view, the add a cart, the begin checkout, the add payment and purchase. Please note that if you're not careful when installing it in Tag Manager as well, you may get duplicate data. So when you install GA in Tag Manager for basic GA coverage, make sure you remove like page view so that whenever you install it through the integration as well, it doesn't double count. So if you're not technical enough or you're not knowing what we mean here, just let me know, and we can certainly clarify. But I want to revisit this one more time just so everybody's clear. You install basic tracking in Tag Manager, and then the plugin is going to pull in the enhanced e-commerce. So you're going to use both. So then if you want to do more custom events, which we certainly recommend you do, a custom event could be, I want to know when people fill out this, specific form for email subscriptions. You're going to do that in Tag Manager, right? And so you're tracking those events through Tag Manager, and then you're still letting Shopify's native integration handle the enhanced e-commerce portion of the data. All right, so I know that's a little tricky, guys. So definitely I'm happy to clarify there. But let's move on to the second common mistake. So this one is relying on the marketing data from the e-com platforms. This is going to help me highlight why some of the advantages of GA4 in more detail. So we had a customer recently say, well, I don't know if I need Google Analytics because I have a lot of traffic data inside of Shopify, or, again, sub in whatever platform that you may be using that has some of that data. But unfortunately, if you just use Shopify's traffic data, it's going to have a lot of differences. And I do want to highlight some important facts that are going to help you guys. So I have a question here real quick. Is there an option to select which events on Shopify will send to GA4? That is in the tool itself. I believe it sends all of them, but I don't remember off the top of my head if the Shopify integration lets you select which ones, but we can definitely get back to you on that. Oh, looks like with an integration, no. Okay, thanks. Somebody jumped in and helped clarify this. So I wanted to show in this slide a couple of just important bullet points that I think is going to round everybody's knowledge out nicely. So as GA4 shifted away from how it was tracking behavior before, before was really related to what we call hits. So it would hit a web page, and it would be a page view. And a lot of things were based off of that kind of functionality. It's now moving away from page views and really shifting towards what it calls events and a lot more user focused data. So users are on the website, they're active users, right? Now it just says users, but it means active users. If you look at Google's terminology, that means that they're doing things, which is really helpful because you don't want to count, things that are not really, or people or visits that are not doing anything as much. So there are differences between how sessions are defined and how bots are counted. So definitely understanding, Shopify might not catch all the bots that GA4 count or catches. Blocker or browser blocking. Sometimes browsers specifically block GA4 or Shopify or different pixels, and there may be some irregular activity or I guess processing of that data. Discrepancies might be introduced because of different reporting time zones. It was one of the most fascinating things working in data, how much time zones can really throw off reporting when it's not matching. So always make sure if Shopify is recording on a one time zone and you're 11 hours off in your GA4 setup, you're already going to be 11 hours of data difference, and this has happened before for us. So make sure that you understand what time zones you're considering when you want the data to match. And again, different ways of recording traffic. So while we understand generally how some of these platforms record traffic, some of the mechanisms are actually never shared because they're proprietary. And so that's an important fact to keep in mind. So now let's talk specifically why Google Analytics tends to be more accurate, not just why things may be different. So the one fascinating thing is that if you think about Google, Google owns YouTube, it owns Google Search, it owns Google Ads, it owns Gmail, right? It owns so many properties. Google is able to leverage that web behavior kind of in a broader term and apply that to a lot of its traffic, understanding of traffic, and a lot of the sort of the data-driven efforts that Google does to fill in the gaps. So sometimes Google Analytics fills in certain gaps on behavior so that you can get a better understanding of what's happening on your website, even though they didn't track it because of cookies or certain browsers limiting that data. Google Analytics has some of the best bot filters. So back in the day when you used to use Google Analytics, you used to get these massive random spikes, and it still can happen from time to time. But GA4 has really made a lot of progress to minimize that inflated data, and you're not going to get that with a lot of alternatives. Again, it tracks active users and sessions rather than hits. And one of the nice things, if you are using last touch, is that it removes that direct non-attribution model. And then last but not least is it makes everything GDPR compliant, which is really nice whenever you're overwhelmed and, in terms of keeping up with everything. Just following those onboarding process from GA4 is really going to help you be more compliant and not have to worry about as many factors there. So not organizing your e-commerce revenue channel data is another major issue that we've seen customers not take into consideration when they're trying to get everything to match up. So what do I mean by revenue channel data? So whenever you're using a modern platform like Shopify or BigCommerce, you're actually selling in different locations, right? So you may have a plugin that takes into consideration your point of sale, like if you have multiple stores, if you're selling on eBay, if you have B2B sales. And so if you're trying to say, hey, how much did I sell on, if you're trying to see how much you sold on Shopify, it might be taking those totals, and that would not be an accurate way to compare it to your e-commerce platform or your GA4. And so with us in PenPath, for example, we try to look at that data and we are familiar with it. And you want to make sure you're identifying the exact orders that you want. I'm sorry, the order type that you want, or order source, I should say, and make sure you just select which ones you want. Now you can do custom reports in Shopify that do the same thing. It was just an easy example here on how we do it in PenPath. But it's interesting how a lot of times, we don't even think about it. We're trying to match both platforms, and you should not be doing that without taking into consideration all the revenue sources that you have in your native e-commerce platform. So common mistake number 4. So if you look through a lot of the Reddit threads and everybody around, why it's not matching, one of the biggest reasons is that you're not using UTMs or you're not using auto tagging. And so I do want to talk a little bit more about this. So UTM parameters, hopefully you all know what they are. Make sure you're using them everywhere. And I'll tell you guys a story here in a bit in terms of like how a major brand was not using UTM parameter and how they were able to resolve that. But I do want to give you guys some tips in terms of how to analyze that data. So again, we've worked with a lot of different e-com brands, and sometimes what to put in that UTM can be really tricky. So I want to give you guys some really cool tips here. The first is really critical. Whether you're working with an agency or you're running your campaigns internally, one of the most important insights that you can take away from your analysis is what are we doing to bring in new customers, right? So we teach this to our customers all the time. There's only 2 ways to make more money. You either get more customers or you get your customers to pay you more. So if that is the premise of this insight, how do we get more customers? And so one of the most important things you could do is you want to tag all of your UTMs with prospecting so that you can then segment that information and say, okay, from all of our campaigns, we've generated, you look in GA4, you filter out everything that has prospecting, you've generated $100,000, right? So to speak. And then you go to Shopify and you say, how much new customer revenue have we generated? And you can say, okay, we generated, $150,000. So you can say, okay, $100,000 out of 150 was generated from these efforts. Those are the types of insights that bring a lot of value at the end of the day, and why UTMs can really play a role. So again, takeaway here is make sure you're using these types of UTMs to track your data. Using product names or product categories is critical as well. So if you have a product, if there's a really good playbook that we use in PenPath where it's like what products are bringing in the most new customers. Once we find that out, we want to run campaigns that might be promoting that product, right? And so putting that product name in your UTMs is also very critical. If you're running promotions, this has also been a really critical UTM component to add, because then you can again check in GA4 how much revenue has been generated from those promotions. Location, the hook that you're using, you can put that at the content level. So in the ad level, you want to put what hook you're using, and then time and season. So one of the questions we have here, how do you make sure that UTMs are persisting on iOS 17 originating traffic? So naturally, there's a lot of challenges around UTMs getting stripped. So one of the ways that we're going to do it is through some of the auditing we're going to check here shortly. First is understanding just how far off, they are, right? Like if you understand how many clicks you're getting from an ad that is 100% accurate on Facebook. Let's just say I run an ad, right? And Facebook tells me we had 100 clicks, right, on this ad. And then you look on your landing page and you see you had a spike in clicks or a spike in sessions or a dip in sessions. You can start seeing maybe a little bit of a gap there. So let's just take this to an extreme to kind of make a point. If I put $1 million into an ad that takes people to a certain landing page, and then I see the direct traffic for that landing page go up or down, you can start sort of seeing how much of an impact maybe that ad is having, even though maybe it strips some of those UTMs. But yeah, there definitely is always unfortunately a gap there, and we're still kind of creating playbooks around it. So I'm not going to spend too much more time, but on UTMs, as I believe many of you already know what they are, but just make sure you're using them, and I would actually use them down to the content level, if you can. And the other tip that's worked for our customers is don't be afraid to use the same tag in many of the different stages. Like it's okay to put prospecting on the ad level and at the medium, or sorry, not the medium level, but probably at the campaign level and at the ad level. it wouldn't hurt you because you can then filter down the road for ads that were for prospecting and how they all performed, etc. Source and medium, you want to keep those pretty standard. CPC, Facebook for source. And we do some pretty cool stuff in PenPath where we actually normalize a lot of that dirty data, like l.facebook and Facebook and fb.com. We do some pretty cool stuff around that too. But you can use your GA4's filters to help you with that a little bit more. Okay, so common mistake number 5 is not auditing your data. So now we're going to get a little bit more advanced for this one. I know some of you might have want more advanced capabilities. So this one is, how do you match, how do you maybe audit it a little bit more closely? So for this one of the great things about GA4, I know a lot of people don't like many things about GA4, but one of the good things about GA4 is that we are seeing transaction IDs inside of GA4. And I want to show you guys how to do this as it may help you do some audits. So and I'm going to give you guys the instructions here in a second. I just want to show you the screenshot so it's easier to see. But essentially, if you go to Explore in GA4, you can get down to all of the transaction IDs that it's pulling if you've integrated it with Shopify. And so what would happen is that, or whatever ecom platform, hopefully your ecom platform is passing those on to GA4. So what would happen is that maybe you do a single day time window, and then you would want to see how many transaction IDs that I have on that day, what's the revenue, and then how many transactions do I see in Shopify and what's the revenue. So now you can again identify, maybe where a lot of the transaction IDs are getting lost, where you would expect to have more. If you add another filter, like in this example, we're adding that source medium filter, but you want to make sure that you can test this and see if it syncs up with your ecom platform as much as possible. So here are the steps to do this. Again, we will be sending the slides and just ask Phil and the others in the chat to get these. But you go to Explore, you set up the variables, you add the dimensions, you add the metrics, and then under settings, you want to do mark nested rows as yes, and you add in rows, add your dimensions, and in values, you add your metrics. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this because the instructions are here. But again, the takeaway for you guys is that it's a very helpful tool. If at the end of the day, you're like, you know what, I've tried everything, it seems like things are still way off, you may have to get to this level of detail and pull out those transaction IDs and see how they match up with your ecom platform. Cool. So the last one is if you do this and you've tried everything and you're still a little bit off, the last answer we usually go to is triangulation. So at the end of the day, kind of like back where we started in the beginning, we talked about these different tools serve different purposes and do different things very well. And the 3 different areas, there's more than 3, but kind of the 3 big buckets of, let's just say, revenue data, because that's what we all care about most, is, you're going to have your ecom platform, you're going to have your GA4, and you're going to have your paid media platforms, right? Those are kind of the 3 buckets of revenue. And so these all will speak to each other, and you're going to be communicating to your executive team differently than your agency and different, and there's a different time and place to use these. So I just want to go over how we think about it and how you can consider it as well. So we always say, your source of truth for revenue is your ecom platform, right? However, your source of truth for sort of blended information, right? What's everything doing is going to be your GA4. And in between there, you have Facebook, your paid media platforms. And I want to tell you guys a story that happened recently with a customer and how they overcame it. So what they noticed was that they were promoting a lot on Instagram, right? They're a clothing store. And they had about $500,000 in revenue coming from Instagram. And so they said, well, that's interesting. All of this is coming from Instagram referral. And I believe that it has to do with, the ads that we're running. And when we looked at the click data from their ads, it seemed like, they were getting a lot of clicks from Instagram ads. And so there was only a few, 400 or 500 clicks happening from Instagram referral that were generating, again, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so what we supported in the investigation concluded is that they had people going from their ads to their Instagram profile and then clicking on their bio link. Their bio link did not have a UTM. And so we concluded that once they added the UTM, that ended up being the case. So people going from the Instagram ad to their profile, clicked on the profile, and then purchased a lot, right? That was people that made it that far were like there to buy. The reason I say that is because that's why Instagram is still plays a role here, because Instagram actually would know that because of obviously the click through window or the view through window that they would attribute to the original ad, right? So GA4 actually said referral or Instagram referral gets this traffic or gets credit, but Meta understood that they were at the ad, then the profile, then the website. And so the point here is that Shopify is not going to know what Meta knows. GA4 is not going to know what Meta knows because Meta, and I'm using Meta as, fill that in with TikTok or any other advertising platform. They know people saw an ad, they know people clicked the ad, and then they know sometimes if they made the purchase on your website. And so what they're now trying to do is they're trying to enable everybody to purchase on Meta. They're trying to enable people to purchase on TikTok, right? These are new things that these platforms, why are they doing that, right? So that you can stay on the platform and so they can get more full visibility on those purchases. And that's why when I was talking about your sales channel and mistake number 3, I just made sure that you knew to filter out Facebook and Instagram from those sales channels, and how they've played a role with our customers. And so long story long here, triangulation is what I want you guys to consider when you're trying to figure out what's happening. Making sure you match maybe clicks from Meta to sessions from Meta, see what the difference is there. Looking at the revenue, obviously it's going to be inflated if Meta is only getting metadata. um, and then understand how to like kind of maybe give it weighted averages there. So in research, triangulation means using multiple data sets, methods, and theories to address those research questions. And then it can help you enhance your validity and credibility of your findings at the end of the day, right? So again, make sure you're always triangulating between these 3 things. So yeah, here's kind of sometimes what you may see. Sometimes the discrepancy can be pretty vast. And so you're going to have to build a feel and an instinct based off of those findings. Okay, guys. So let's go over some key takeaways from today's webinar. Use GA4 native GA4 integrations for your ecom platform if you can. If you cannot, then obviously just stick with the standard Google Tag Manager approach. Leverage both ecom platform data and GA4 data. Ecom platform is better for revenue and for order sources, and then GA4 is better for that traffic data and integrating all of your traffic. Number 3 is organize your e-commerce revenue channel data. So understand how you're operating. If somebody calls in and makes an order, don't punch it in as a web order because then because GA4 never tracked that. Punch it in as draft order, or punch it in as a B2B order. Organize that as much as you can on that on your e-com side. Make sure you're using UTMs and auto tagging. I didn't talk much about auto tagging, but just for everybody who doesn't know what auto tagging is, there's different settings where your UTM will be generated automatically, and it'll just fill in with what you named your campaign. So if you named your campaign, spring sale 2024, then the auto tagging is going to say, oh, I'm going to just use this as the campaign UTM. Audit your data. You can access more level of detail in GA4 and compare total transactions, and then make sure you triangulate your insights at the end of the day. So you can hopefully get a better idea of your data. Okay, so I appreciate everybody watching. I will offer you guys a special bonus today for watching this. So only for attendees today, if you fill out this form, we're going to back up your GA3 data. So PenPath is able to access that. We're going to back it up. We're going to give you guys a free trial of PenPath GA4 dashboards. So we have some really cool, and this is for e-commerce brands specifically, with some awesome dashboards. You guys will get a free trial, and we'll help you guys surface some insights. They're much more similar to the GA3 experience and much more powerful. And then we're going to do a quick measurement strategy session with you guys too, to make sure that, maybe you're comfortable with 80% and you're missing another 20%. We'll do that as well. This does take a lot of resources from our team. So, while a lot of it is turnkey, we do like to spend time. So there is limited space. There might be a waiting list. So just first come, first serve type of approach here. So just go ahead and fill out those forms. But with that said, would love to take on any questions that I can answer. And we do partner with Measure Minds. So Measure Minds is also very experienced when it comes to those let's just say level of detail setups and tag manager, et cetera. So if I can't answer something, there's no doubt that Measure Minds will be able to fill in the blanks as well.
Cool. Thanks for that, Alex, and for the mention that. So I'm just going to open up the questions, and I guess I'll read these out from the top.
Sure.
So Melissa has asked, how can we check to make sure it's set up correctly? I'm gonna just give two kind of free tools that actually can do that. So I've just put into chat. There's a GTM grader if they're using GTM, and if they're using consent mode, we've also got a free consent mode grader. So that would give them a score and basically tell them 1 out of 10, 10 being if it's set up correctly and 1 being not. I suppose the other part of that question is which CMS Melissa's kind of using. Maybe if she asks that in a separate kind of question, because it's a slightly different process for Shopify versus other sites. But as Alex mentioned, kind of checking that kind of deviation between like the Shopify data and GA4 is a good way to kind of check to see if it's working or not. I don't know if you want to add anything else on that question, Alex.
No, that covers it well.
Okay. So Aliana asked, does Shopify integrate well with GTM? Should we use GTM and configure the data, or go with a native Google and YouTube integration? And that's a kind of a technical one. I mean, Alex kind of answered that earlier in the sense that I would suggest using a combination of both. So using the native Shopify GA4 integration and then adding GTM on the top to cover the stuff that Shopify misses.
Yep.
That's kind of best of both worlds. So the other question on the how it's from Nazian, if I pronounced that correctly. How can I match transaction ID from GA4 with one displayed in Shopify? So I think that was referring to the Explorer report that you showed on the screen.
Yeah, so back to this slide here. So transaction IDs is a report that you can do in Shopify. Now this is a little bit more on my team's end. We deal with all different platforms. So I don't remember off the top of my head how you get to the transaction ID export, but you should be able to build a report inside of Shopify that exports all your transaction IDs for a time frame. So then you would want to follow this step on the GA4 side, these steps on the GA4 side to get that to cross-check against. And Phil, do you remember off the top of your head where that report is on the Shopify side of things?
Not to hand, but I mean, you could download a CSV, import that into Google Sheets, and then do like a VLOOKUP or similar for that transaction ID kind of matching. The thing I would say, looking at doing a matching of daily kind of deviation and also like 1 day's worth of data with all the transaction IDs is a good kind of process. But yeah, doing some form of continual monitoring just to make sure that it's not the deviation hasn't suddenly kind of changed.
Yeah, exactly. 1 day of data is plenty.
Yeah, I mean for the transaction IDs, yeah.
It can get overwhelming.
Someone's asked, can you get a copy of the slides for this webinar? I mean, I'm going to put the link to the feedback in chat. So if people fill in the feedback, so if they've got further questions, they can ask them at the end of that feedback kind of form in the kind of open bit, and also the link to the PDF, the slides, is on the thank you page of the feedback form. But also the kind of tips that Alex mentioned. I'm also just going to post or repost the link to your kind of bonus tips and your kind of e-commerce strategic workshop. I'll just put that in chat. So there's a question here from Razvan. One thing I've noticed in GA e-commerce data is that Shopify will change the product ID slightly differently. For example, it will change the product SKU or product, which is the product ID in GA4, slightly after the user selects the size of the product. So there's a product variation. So this breaks the product attribution in GA4. Any recommendations?
That's a pretty good question. That's not something that I could probably answer right now, but I could certainly have one of our developers look into that. That's something that we typically work with.
I've seen. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
go ahead.
I mean, it is possible to push in a custom definition, hit level custom definition with a different like type of product ID, or this might be the one of the few instances of where if you might not want to use the Shopify native integration and use the like liquid themes kind of variables to kind of build an ideal e-commerce data layer. So that would be kind of one way around it, but it might be slightly easier to. It is possible to use the native integration, then add an additional event with just the extra like
Yeah,
product ID field.
right.
So that there's kind of ways around it, but yeah, there's not, annoyingly, in the Shopify native integration, it doesn't say what do you want to use for your kind of item ID. I know in WooCommerce, GTM for WooCommerce, it lets you pick which one you want to use. They unfortunately Shopify don't give you that option. Oh, this is an interesting one. So Pete asked, this is one for you, Alex. We've seen a dramatic decline in orders captured in GA4 versus Shopify in the past 2 months. Typically, run rates was 80% of actual orders, i.e. 20% missing. Now it's down to 50%, i.e. 50% missing. Any advice on where to look to first diagnose?
There's been a lot of updates recently with consent mode. I know that for a fact. That has certainly could impact this quite a bit. I would just make sure that your consent mode is working as expected. And then I use a tool called Philly, you were telling me about another one actually, but I use a tool called Data Slayer where I can go in and just see if all my pixels are firing correctly, and it shows you, or Google Tag Manager's Tag Helper. I always, just my opinion, I always like to go in as if I was a customer in an incognito mode and just see, are all my tags firing? And sometimes you'll actually surface some opportunities there. And then I would also look at your individual traffic sources and segment that down. Is it a dip from Google Ads? Is it a dip from Facebook ads? Is it a dip from direct? Where is that dip happening exactly? And hopefully it can help you again identify what might be the source of this change.
Yeah, I mean, if it ties in with the kind of 6th of March and it's a European site, then it's probably likely related to the consent mode changes. I mean, we've had some sites where they've not had enough kind of data to trigger consent mode. So even they've turned it on, it hasn't enabled the kind of upscaling of opt-outs. But if someone's got, let's say, as a 20% opt-out, that would explain part of it. But yeah, dropping, there's a 30% drop. So yeah, it sounds like something's not quite working right on there. The other thing I would say would be do a test transaction for like $100 item, so you know that the input should be $100, and depending if tax is included or excluded, look at that and just see if like kind of test all what you put in and you see that same thing. But the other bit would be running that kind of transaction ID download for one day, or and running kind of a maybe almost 3-month look back for daily deviation, just to see if there's a particular, like the day that it suddenly kind of dropped.
Yeah, I think kind of the takeaway there is, whenever you guys find any kind of these irregularities, my first thought is always, how can I segment? Again, I gave you a couple of examples. Is it, where in the traffic are we seeing differences? Where in the behavior are we seeing differences, or in page views? Those are always a good place to start. And, hopefully that gives you at least more of a directional approach.
Also, one thing to note: sometimes the purchase event in GA4, it's the kind of sort of deduping of that is not correctly set. As in, out of the box, you have to turn on like don't count this twice. So that can sometimes cause kind of too much data to be shown in GA4 and it to like mismatch with kind of actual data. There's annoyingly like GA4 doesn't dedupe on a transaction ID. So if someone purchases and then visits like a print order page or reopens the browser after a transaction we've sometimes seen it like count the same ID twice on different days. Yeah, but that would cause the too much to be recorded rather than too little in this case. So it's probably a deeper dive. The other one that I would say if it's a sudden drop is sometimes if a site's got they've enabled a content security policy, or let's say they've got two e-commerce areas and one area they've turned it on, that we've seen a massive kind of drop, as in like the server stops the hit from being sent. There's Rich has asked a question here. He's seeing a 20% missing transaction IDs in GA4 when compared to Shopify recorded orders on more than one store. Dozens of posts on Shopify about from support that mirror this complaint. Any insight on the actual? I mean, it doesn't state on. So, Rich, it doesn't. I don't know whether this is you using native Shopify integration with GA4 or a kind of data layer or liquid themes kind of integration, which would okay native. Yeah. I mean, there's always going to be kind of ad blockers that you can't unfortunately get around, and also like refunds, which would cause the data to be kind of different. Alex, I don't know if you've got any other suggestions for.
I would say, is there any other indicators of like where those orders might be coming from? In terms of like, I'm trying to think of segmentation as my only go-to right now without knowing more information. But we tried running it down to the user agent level. We weren't able to see distinguishing characteristics. Yeah, I think the most important thing here is to see when the dip is happening. Was it, you said, a recent drop in 20%, or has it always been off about 20%? Because I wonder if it has to do with the consent mode. Yeah, I'm not sure for a few months because you've already checked the transactions. I mean, ultimately, how is it capturing the data is like kind of where I'm going. I don't know, Phil. I think that might be one that we'd have to have a deeper dive to figure out.
Yeah, there is. I'm just grabbing a link quickly for. It's always a good idea to send the Google Ads pixel as well as the GA4 kind of pixel.
Right.
I mean, Google Ads, make sure it's marked as secondary so you don't like double count. But that then allows you to kind of like have kind of a second way of checking. I mean, it's worth bearing in mind that the Google Ads Pixel does run in kind of greedy mode, or any touch point kind of wins, whereas GA4 is like the last kind of touch point or kind of data driven mode. The other thing I was going to mention, there is a setting just for US sites about a data retracted kind of feature, which Google Ads and Facebook support, which possibly, if your legal team allow you, you could set your transaction pixel to always send, i.e. remove a blocking trigger, and just turn on this data retracted feature. That would be one way of increasing the total like counts. This would be assuming you're running it via GTM, not via Shopify native, where you don't have that sort of that level of control. But I'll put the link to this data retracted feature into chat. Just give me a second. I don't know if you want to look at the next question, Alex, while I just grab this link.
Sure. Not as familiar with. Reasonable expected discrepancy. Great question. So we're typically happy if we can get it around 10%. But there are so many variables here that it could be more. But if it's 10%, I think we're in good shape. And we try to get as close to as possible to be matching Shopify, but that's a good question. What percent is considered? Yep. So somebody asked the same question. If we use e-commerce, platform data, or business back office to track revenue, how do we map those revenue numbers? So we've actually done we've done it where we have a customer who had like punch out orders, and essentially we had to create another advanced I guess I forget how we forget off the top of my head, but like we essentially created its own transaction event that the punch out order would go through. And it ended up being where you, because the one thing that we like about GA4 is that every event does have its mapped to where the people came from. In GA3, you would be limited to 20 goals, and only goals would have the source of that traffic that converted into the goal. And so what's nice is now you can create these custom events, and then you can associate where people came from with the event. So theoretically, you could set up advanced events for the B2B checkout, as long as it's not going through the same checkout sort of process. You can also maybe put an additional form, fill, or trigger, or different checkout page to again differentiate B2B sales from direct to consumer sales or back office sales. Oh, glad you thought so, Renee. It was a really pleasure having you. What percentage? I think we got all the questions. Phil, I'm not as familiar with the Zoom webinar features. Did we get all the questions answered, Phil?
Yeah, I think we're on time now. So if any other further questions, we can answer those via email. Thank you again for doing that talk, Alex. I'll repost your LinkedIn kind of link in chat so people can connect with you directly there, and also that kind of e-commerce like strategic review link I'm just grabbing quickly. I'm going to put that into chat for people sort of to fill in. Oops. So that's that one. Oops. And also, if people have got feedback on or suggestions on either Alex's talk or sort of talks for us to sort of cover in the future, if you add that on in the feedback link, which I'm just grabbing quickly and putting into chat. Where has it gone? Oh no, it didn't copy. Okay, yeah, if you could grab that, Will. Brilliant. I'll just
the other thing that I just wanted to mention before everybody drops off is we're announcing the next GA Forward conference. I'll just pop a link to that in the chat as well. That'll be for the 11th of June, but again, like if you've been to them before, you know what they're like. Free to attend, 7 hours of talks, tips and training. So yeah, if you want to put yourself forward as a speaker as well, get in touch with me and we can discuss that for sure.
Thanks, that Will. And I should just sort of reiterate what Alex mentioned in the sense that if people haven't got a plan for backing up their GA3 data, either to PenPath solution or BigQuery or similar, they need to think about that, because 1st of July is approaching pretty quickly, and that data is just going to hit the bin at that point. So it's something you definitely need to think about. Thanks for that, everyone, and hopefully you've learned something useful today. And thanks again, Alex, for doing the talk.
Yeah, thanks for having me, everybody.
Right, cheers.